Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode recap and thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the B segment of episode 20 of The Loud House, The Waiting Game. We begin this segment at the cafeteria in Royal Woods Elementary School, where Lincoln and Clyde are anxiously awaiting the arrival of one of their classmates, a boy named Chandler. Lincoln explains to the audience that Chandler's birthday is on Friday of the week that this segment takes place on, and he's hosting his birthday at the sewage treatment plant that his dad works at. A lot of kids are excited to go to this party, and Chandler's apparently one of the more popular kids in their grade. So then Chandler does arrive in the cafeteria, and he makes a very showboaty, flashy entrance that's aided by, we're presumed to be friends in his inner circle, and they're apparently the classmates from Save the Date, two of them anyway. And Chandler proceeds to hand out invitations to whatever kids are in the cafeteria, except for Lincoln and Clyde, and they're not happy about it. We later then cut to later on in the day, and Lincoln and Clyde are at an arcade called Gus's Games Grubs, and they're venting their frustrations by playing arcade games. We also find out that Lori is working there. She needed money to buy a dress for an Under the Sea themed dance that's happening at Royal Woods High School on Friday. And Lincoln apparently found the job opening and suggested it to Lori. And she's very grateful to Lincoln for the help. In fact, she gives him, and by extension Clyde, the tokens that she received. Apparently employees receive free tokens, but she decides to let Lincoln and by extension Clyde have them as a show of her thanks. And later on, she even gives them a free pizza and free root beer too, to continue to show her gratitude. It's at this point though when Chandler shows up, and he questions Lincoln, although he mistakenly refers to him as Larry, about how he got the free stuff. Lincoln explains he got it from his sister who works there, and then he quickly decides to let Chandler have some of the free pizza as well. He tells Clyde that maybe if they let Chandler in on the free freebies that Lori is giving them, then maybe he'll invite them to his birthday. And we see him also offer the tokens that Lincoln offers Chandler, the tokens that Lincoln got from Lori, to when Chandler runs out of tokens for one of the arcade games, to help to keep a good impression. And Chandler ends up bringing up his birthday coming up and even suggests that Lincoln and Clyde come to it. He says that he'll bring the invitations with him to give to them tomorrow, telling them to meet him at Gus's Games Grubs tomorrow. So when the next day does arrive though, Chandler he doesn't seem to remember the invitations at first, and some of his friends come along, and well, what happens essentially is Chandler keeps wanting to get freebies from Lincoln from Lori. And Lori tells Lincoln that she has to ease up on the free stuff or else her boss will be angry with her. But Lincoln's desire for the invitation overrides that feeling, and he starts to guilt trip Lori into giving him the free stuff so he can give it to Chandler. And this is essentially what happens throughout this scene, is that Chandler keeps wanting more free stuff, and Lincoln ends up guilt tripping Lori to give him some free stuff, so he gives it to Chandler. Wet lather, rinse, repeat. And then by the end of the day, Chandler, at the very last minute, might I add, finally gives Lincoln and Clyde the invitations. And then it eventually cuts to Friday night, and Lincoln's all prepared for the party, but before he goes, he notices that Lori's in her work uniform, not her dress that she worked so hard to buy so she could take part in this dance. Lori reveals that her boss is making her work overtime tonight because they have to make back the profits that they didn't get when Lori gave Lincoln all the free stuff that he in turn gave to Chandler. Not too long after that, Clyde shows up and he's in a hazmat suit. Apparently, Harold and Howard wouldn't let Clyde go to the sewage treatment plant unless he wore it. Can't say I blame the two, honestly. But then Clyde wants to know if Lincoln is ready to make this night a memorable one. But seeing Lori's sad look on her face, Lincoln says yes with a determined look in his face. We later cut to Gus's Gaming Grubs, only to find out that it's not Lori who's working there, but Lincoln. Lori then arrives in her dress, and she thanks Lincoln. It turns out Lincoln convinced the boss to let him work in Lori's stead so Lori can take part at the dance that she's been hoping to go to. She does admit, though, that she feels bad that Lincoln won't be able to make it to his friend's party, but Lincoln quickly realizes and tells Lori that Chandler wasn't really his friend, he was just using him, and it led to Lincoln using Lori, and he's deeply sorry for doing so. But the two siblings do make amends, and they hug each other. And then they hear Bobby coming. Well, they hear a car crashing, or a crash noise, and they easily piece together it's Bobby. And Lincoln tells his oldest sister to go have fun. Lori thanks him again, and off she goes with Bobby. Clyde arrives actually not too long after. It turns out he ended up deciding not to go since Lincoln wasn't going to go either. So he decided to keep Lincoln company while he covers for Lori. But then they get a surprise. It turns out the boss wants Lincoln to deal with the bathroom complications, let's say. And, well, we don't see it with our own eyes, thankfully. We just see the outside of Gus's Gaming Grubs. And apparently, though, Lincoln and Clyde get to experience the very thing they were hoping to experience at Chandler's party. And they seem to like it better than what they would have thought would have been at the sewage treatment plant. And that's where the segment ends. Now, this segment actually reminded me a lot of Out on a Limo, at least in the broad sense that Lincoln's less flattering actions in the segment were influenced by another character who wasn't so benevolent. In the case of Out on a Limo, it was Lord Tetherby's arrogant, egotistical attitude. But in this segment, it was a fellow classmate and Chandler. And this is Chandler's only major role, at least at the time of the recording of this video. This is Chandler's only major role so far. And he's already, though, made a name for himself among fans of the show. In particular, he's actually the go-to antagonist for many fan works, and some fans actually note that fan works tend to play up Chandler's antagonism. He's still a jerk, make no mistake about that, but fan works tend to portray Chandler in a more hostile manner than he was here, while he came off more like he kind of was more like stringing Lincoln and Clyde along to get more free stuff before he gave them the invitations to his party. And some people weren't too thrilled about Chandler's antagonism being played up in fan works, though if I'm being honest, it doesn't bother me so much with Chandler, mostly because with the other characters that seem to get their antagonism exaggerated by some fans, whether it's the Loud family, usually the sisters, though the parents and Lincoln aren't really safe from it either, Ronnie Ann, or even Rusty Spokes. I say that because we haven't gotten to Rusty's next major appearance yet, but I'll go a little more into that. But I did cover that a little bit, where Rusty, as he acted in Hand Me Downer, doesn't act the same way as he is when we get to his next appearance. So in a sense, there are some fans out there that kind of do portray Rusty more as he was when we first saw him. But I'm getting a little off topic. Bottom line is, those characters, while they have been shown to have some unflattering moments, they still were shown eventually to be good people at heart, even if they made some bad choices from time to time. Chandler, in contrast, he really doesn't have any redeeming qualities to him or any sympathetic qualities to him. He's kind of like Lord Tetherby and I guess you could say the bratty kid from Serial Offender, or Link Clone, if you will. Those characters are probably the closest the show has to any actual villains. I mean, in a show like The Loud House, there really isn't a character that's truly evil. The worst you have are the antagonistic jerk variations of the Type 4 anti-villains, the nominal villains. But Chandler definitely is one of those antagonistic jerks in the sense, like, he's really not sympathetic. There's nothing redeemable about Chandler. So, to me, I'm not too bothered by Chandler's played up antagonism, if only because there really isn't anything sympathetic about him in the first place. And some fans actually managed to come up with some pretty reasonable explanations for why Chandler might act more hostile in fan works compared to the show itself. Like, some go under the impression that maybe Chandler, the way he acts in the show is how he acts when he gets his way or when he's in control, while he might act more hostile towards Lincoln and Clyde when they stop giving him free stuff at the arcade, in like sort of as a continuation after this. Others also come to think of it as Chandler, when Lincoln and Clyde didn't show up to his party, because some fans have noted that some segments seem to portray Lincoln and Clyde as sort of outcasts among their peers. So maybe when they didn't show up to the popular kids' party, even though they got invitations, that set Chandler off, and why he decides to torment them in fan works. And it's like, okay, yeah, I can buy into those explanations. So that's why I don't particularly mind that Chandler's kind of made into the go-to bad guy in fan works. Now, as for other aspects about the segment, this was actually a nice example of showing us Laurie's more sympathetic side, or shows Laurie in a better light than usual. I say this because Laurie's probably one of the Loud sisters who seems to have the worst reputation among many of the fans. Like, Lola and eventually Lynn seem to also be up there in the least sympathetic of the Loud sisters, or at least the sisters that probably most fans aren't too fond of in comparison. So it was nice to show us that while Laurie can have her mean moments, she definitely can have her kind moments too. And she was honestly grateful to Lincoln that he was able to help her find a way to get the dress that she wanted for this dance. And it was unfortunate that she ended up being used, I guess you could say, more so directly by Lincoln, but indirectly by Chandler, I guess you could say. And yeah, as for Lincoln here, he did eventually realize the consequences of his actions, of Chandler's influence, and he made good by it by letting Laurie still go to her party, but making it up to her boss over the mess that he played a part in. So that was another good example. It shows us Lincoln definitely isn't perfect, but he does have a good heart deep down, and he was willing to step up and admit his mistake and try to make good by it. So good on you, Lincoln. And probably the only thing many people actually don't seem to like about this segment is that Chandler never really paid the price for for what he did, being the root of the conflict, as his influence is what led to Lincoln taken advantage of Laurie's generosity by he himself taking advantage of Lincoln's generosity. And yeah, that probably might contribute why some fans portray Chandler in a more negative light. Maybe because, unlike Lord Tetherby, who actually did end up getting his comeuppance, Chandler never really seemed to pay the price for his actions. So that probably contributed to why he's not portrayed in a good light by some fans. So as for which segment I prefer more than the other, I might give the edge more to the A segment, but I don't necessarily dislike the B segment either. Just maybe more of a win for the A segment, like more like a minor win for that side rather than it being a very obvious difference, we'll say. And with that covered, we've now discussed both segments of episode 20 on this channel. Take care, and until next time.